Good evening, everyone. I'm Jordan Washington. Thank you so much for joining me today for my presentation over the professional learning community, its relationship to teacher instruction and student learning. I want to begin by giving you a summary of the study itself. What I was trying to do in the study is determine whether or not there was a relationship between a teacher's involvement in the PLC and his or her classroom instruction, as well as the student learning growth. To do that, I came up with a 28-question survey that I gave to 16 teachers, and I used pre and post PLC student data from 110 samples. My results were that there's definitely a connection between the two. PLCs can affect classroom instruction, and there is a correlation to student learning growth, even though it is rather weak. It all began with 2001's No Child Left Behind Act. What that act did was it placed increased attention on the best ways to evaluate and connect a teacher's performance to student learning growth. But what we also found was that there was no universal definition for what an effective teacher was. And that left us with 3 questions. What determines effectiveness? How do you measure quality? And how do you improve on both? The basic purpose of the PLC is collaboration, and that idea is not new. That idea has been in literature since 1982. The PLC formation itself began in 1995, and after that we saw a surge in the practice, but we also saw teacher isolation, which is basically where teachers teach the children how to collaborate, but they don't collaborate themselves. And that led us to the hardships of defining the PLC model. There is no sole definition or means of implementation for it, and that led to a lack of commonality. But there was research that attempted to erase that lack of commonality, and that began with the 5 habits of a proper PLC. And those are accountability, dialogue, relationships, knowing the difference between the PLC and professional development, and making sure that the meeting had the end goal in mind. Another important aspect of the PLC is self-reflection. For teachers, self-reflection is very important because it helps change our perceptions about a lot of different things. The PLC has promise, but it cannot meet the needs of that promise without research. And what I have found in this study is that there's limited research, and limited research leads to limited understanding, and then that leaves the subject stuck as a more theoretical aspect instead of a definitive one. For my study, my purpose was, again, just to investigate the relationship between a teacher's participation in the PLC and their classroom instruction, as well as student learning growth. The justification was, in fact, the minimal research that I was just explaining. We have minimal research on its impact. We have minimal research on the effective inner workings of the PLC. And also, the parish that I teach in right now, we are trying to become the forerunners in the forefront of the PLC movement. But what I found is that we don't know a lot about it. In coming up with this study, I found 8 different studies that kind of gave me a framework for where I wanted to go with this study. Lewis and Marks, what they found is that there is a positive correlation between classroom organization and student learning achievement. That opened a gateway for the basis of my study. Graham, what he found was that there was a positive correlation in some areas, but not all. That provided some insight and empirical evidence into what type of issues I may run into in my study, but it also gave me a framework for my mixed methods instruments. Saunders et al., their expectations were correct. What they did in their particular study is they introduced teacher teams to Title I or low-performing schools to see if it would make a difference in student achievement, and it made a 4-point difference. So what that did for me is it became the base model for the comparison portion of my study. Tan and Callion, what they found was nothing. They found that more research is needed. What they were trying to do was identify the issues PLC teachers run into when they try to actually collaborate with one another. But what they found was that it takes a lot more than just a research study to figure that out. But what it gave to me for mine is it let me know that there is a purpose for my study. The teachers of this study were given an opportunity to pay attention to the individual, and what they realized is that they need an opportunity to collaborate together. Song, he found no correlation between a teacher's level of empowerment and their ability to accept school reform. Because Bossier Parish is a new parish to the PLC idea, they've received a lot of pushback. And so what this study did for me is it demonstrates how effective a PLC can be when the focus is in the right place, but it also shows a PLC can affect a teacher's instruction. Flores et al., their results were, what they found was the way in which a school structures the PLC actually has a great impact on the effectiveness of the PLC, which is something I also found in my study. Calkin, they tried to determine the relationship between the PLC, the bureaucratic structure, and the organizational trust, and they found a positive correlation between it. But what it did for me was shine a light on how teachers' true participation in the PLC is affected by their trust in the program and its leaders. Meaning, if the teacher doesn't trust the process, if they don't trust the people implementing the process, they're going to struggle and have difficulties. Weiss and Brigham, their results were they found out that professionals planning together is important, which again is the purpose of the PLC, and it just revealed a clear need for research that analyzes the actual impact a collaborative structure like the PLC can have on teacher instruction and as a result student learning. I have two main questions for my research. Does a teacher's involvement in the PLC affect their classroom instruction, and is there a correlation to student achievement? My hypothesis is yes for both. My participants, what I did was I chose 16 core teachers from Benton High School in Bossier Parish, and I used 110 samples of student data from the English 1 and English 2 students of those teachers. With my instruments, I created a 28-question teacher survey over multiple aspects of the PLC, from the inner workings to the outer workings to how the teachers felt about it in general. And I gave it to the teachers about 2 weeks ahead, and they had 2 weeks to either return it to me in digital form or in printed form. And then with the student portion of the study, I used pre and post PLC assessments. I used a diagnostic test, a new diagnostic test for Bossier Parish called LEAP 360, and a new end of course assessment test called LEAP 2025. It should be noted that the diagnostic test is a parish required test, and the end of course test is a state required test. What I found as far as the teachers is that 50% of them disagree that the PLC had any impact on their classroom instruction, organization, or management, even though it made them feel more confident. 69% felt more like a more effective teacher prior to their PLC involvement, while 25% felt their students' learning greatly improved after their PLC involvement, which seems like there's a bit of a discrepancy there, but we'll get to exactly how they went on to explain that. It should also be noted that 100% of the participants let me know that they enjoyed teaching before they were in a PLC and they no longer enjoy it. In my survey, I also asked the teachers whether or not their PLCs actually adhered to DuFour's 4 essential questions of the PLC, and the majority of them said that they do, which again seems a bit different to the results we were just discussing. As far as the benefit the PLC has on student learning growth, participants, only one participant, or 6% of the participants, felt that the PLC was actually beneficial to the student learning, and only 2 of the participants felt that it was a great experience overall. For the student portion of the study, I used English 1 and English 2 student data. What you'll see here is that there is a 29.3 point increase in the mean value from the student scores from their pre-test and their post-test, which lets us know that the students definitely performed better on the post-test. For English 2, there was a 29.6 point increase, which again shows that students performed better on the post-PLC assessment. For the inferential statistics, what I was trying to do was see if there was any significant difference between the pre and post scores, and there is. And for the correlation, I was trying to see if there's a positive correlation between the English 1 data set and the English 2 data set. There is a positive correlation, but as you can see by the 0.1 difference here, that the correlation was rather insignificant. So overall, despite the statistically significant difference between the numerical assessment scores and the t-test analysis, the correlation shows us that there is a relationship, but it's weak, which lets us know that we aren't really sure if the PLC itself had anything to do with that increase. But my findings are not new. My findings were definitely replicated in Lewis and Marks in 1998. But unlike Lewis and Marks, the majority of the presence of my studies participants did not see a change in classroom instruction. Additionally, the participants had a couple of complaints that gave me some insight as to why they didn't see a change, or why they had such negative feelings about their experience in the PLC. And what you'll see on here is most of them feel that the teachers aren't really buying into it, and some of them feel that the administration requirements made it really, really difficult to actually utilize the PLC for the collaboration that it's supposed to be used for. But as Graham stated in a 2007 study, even under the best circumstances, developing a successful PLC is difficult work and requires organizational and leadership strategies that are foundational and ongoing. Again, the participants went on to blame the curriculum and the school setups for the issues that occurred in their PLCs. Here, one participant basically said that the curriculum itself took away the individuality of the teachers, which made it very hard for them to alter it for the individual needs for the student. Here, one participant said the overcrowding in the rooms made it difficult for the remediation and enhancement that they figured out within the PLC. And here, this participant says that the consistent and constant testing of the students made it difficult to keep them up to par on on the standards they were supposed to be mastering. The students basically got burned out. But 62% of my participants felt that it was the curriculum, actually, that negatively impacted their PLC's progress. And that goes on to say that the way a school structures its PLCs and the lack of understanding it may create greatly impacts the effectiveness of the PLC, as well as how the teachers feel about the process. And if you don't have people buying in, it's hard to get the end result. Generalizability. For this study, it's probable but limiting. You can replicate the study, and you can definitely use the study to open up a discussion about the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of a PLC or its structure, but it doesn't really give us any more than that. As far as implications go, the study lets us know that students can definitely expect to see some form of improvement from before the PLC to after the PLC, from the pre-assessment to the post-assessment. But what we don't know, one of the limitations, is that we don't know whether or not the PLC had anything to do with that. Also, for this particular set, the tests that I used, they covered the same skill set, but it wasn't the exact same content. So again, we don't know if the information on the pre-PLC was easier than the information on post-PLC, so we really aren't sure exactly what to attribute that increase in point and percentage to. Again, I only looked at a small sample of students and a small sample of teacher responses. So again, I don't really know if we had used a larger sample, if the results would have been different, would have been more valid, more reliable, or if we would have seen a stronger connection. And I also don't know if the student data came from a prescribed curriculum that was brand new and, as our quotes show, very unpopular. It was even reported that some teachers followed the curriculum verbatim while others did their own thing, and the teachers who did their own thing outperformed the teachers who followed the curriculum. So again, we aren't really sure whether or not the PLC is what we can attribute the success of the students to. So my suggestions for future research is, number one, study whether the difference in how a teacher presents the curriculum has something to do with the student learning growth. Two, use the same exact test for the pre-PLC and post-PLC assessment in order to get a really true result as to whether or not it affects anything. And then three, extend the time frame of the study so you can include a larger number of student samples and teachers that can give feedback so you get even more information as to exactly why they feel the way they feel. And that's all I have for you. Do you have any questions?
No, maybe comments. No questions. Y'all have any questions? Nothing? Oh, okay. What about? No? Good job.
Well, thank you.
I think
I'm
good
Jordan
job.
Washington.
All right.